Okay. And so I'd like to start with a kavanah, an intention, that we gather together in community, seeking wholeness and peace in the timeless wisdom of Torah. May we find together the shalom and the shlema, the peace and completeness that we seek. I hope everybody knows the bracha. I won't screen share. We'll just say it slowly together. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu
mitzvotav
v'tzivanu ba'asok b'divrei
Torah.
Torah. Okay, so for today's opening question, do you believe in second chances, and have you given or gotten one? Yes, Ashley.
Absolutely. I believe in them. I've seen them. I've given them. I've gotten them. My most significant second chance is the second chance at high school success. Started high school, did terribly. My father unexpectedly told us we were all moving. And in my junior year of high school, we moved to Albany, New York. I got a second chance, different set of teachers, different set of students, and it was a roaring success. So I believe in second chances, either intentional or happenstancial, if that's a word. I've seen it.
Thank you for sharing that very personal moment of second chance that clearly revived you.
Sure.
Ken, do I see you making motions to
talk?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm thinking about how to say it, but yeah, I mean, I had a second chance with a girlfriend, and with that worked out pretty well. But I'm scanning my memory, and I don't remember giving anybody a second chance, but I guess that means I owe someone now. So yeah.
Okay, well, that's great. I bet if you scan the memory banks, you'll find a couple.
I better.
Most likely.
Maybe. I appreciate the vote of confidence.
Oh, totally. I have total confidence in you, Ken. Okay, Annette.
What would life be without second chances? Oh my God, what an indictment not to have them. I think the most profound experience is when I witnessed of second chances, which for a few years I was involved in a restorative justice program. And one of my most profound learning experiences was these three guys who were in it, who had all grown up on the streets of Boston, basically kicked out of their homes when they were like 5, 6, 7 years old, or who had parents who couldn't parent them, and who had all gone to prison as teenagers, one of them for killing someone. And I think they all had life sentences, but somehow had gotten paroled in their 40s or 50s. And were doing amazing work in the neighborhoods they had grown up in to try to help the kids in those neighborhoods not go down the same path they were going. I was in awe. I am in awe of them. I'm still in touch. I'm not involved in the program anymore for a variety of reasons, but I still support what they do, and I'm in awe of them. And I mean, I thought before that we should have prison reform, but now I'm really a big advocate of prison reform. They worked on themselves in prison, and they are just astounding human beings.
Wow, what beautiful stories. You think about the resilience that is required, particularly at ages 5 or 6, to be cast out of their homes or abandoned by their parents, and to somehow muster in prison the ability to transform themselves.
Right. So. Where there was really very little support, but they had one guy from the outside who was supporting them, and they formed a group. I mean, they spent their first 5, 8 years in prison just being angry, and then they decided that wasn't going to get them anywhere. And it's awe-inspiring.
Well, thank you for the good works that you did on that.
I don't know that I did so much good work, but Thank you.
I have confidence in you too.
And I crapped out on it. I just said,
Yeah.
this is not going to work for the kids I'm trying to help.
Right, right. Would anyone else?
Okay, so I was thinking about the term second chance. And I'm wondering what that really means. I think my life is full of those. I can't even imagine not having second chances. Stories, and that was a beautiful story. I don't think and there's anywhere I could even think about that, but small second chances. Giving students second chances my whole teaching career, allowing them to, even plagiarism cases where I asked them then to keep journals so that they could tell us, so that it wasn't a massive essay that they felt they had to write, and just journals of their personal understandings. And that was very successful, a very successful part of second chance. I've been given second chances over and over again, not the least by my husband, who, I wasn't sure that was the one, but he said he was. Very glad. 60 years of marriage. I'm pretty glad he pursued it. So I can't imagine being without second chances, and I don't even know if they're second or if they're just kind of happen because we're in a, we pursue a certain road and take on certain responsibilities and obligations that put us in that situation.
Well, I love several aspects of what you talked about. The plagiarism story is wonderful because you also diagnosed a way to sort of make the task less daunting for them and teach them a way out of the situation that led them to plagiarism, and this whole concept of what does it mean to have second chances when you're on this kind of continuous road. Wonderful. And Mazel Tov on 60 years.
Can I just say I love that story, Deborah, because when I was in college, which was a long time ago, plagiarism was so terrifying because there weren't as many options in those days, but it was so terrifying to think that one might inadvertently plagiarize and it would be the end of one's college career and the end of one's life. And it was like the big boogeyman. And I was always terrified that I might inadvertently plagiarize and it would be literally the end of my life at the age of 18, 19, 20. So I think that's beautiful what you did.
I'll just say that for me, I've thought a lot about parenting my adult children as a second chance and a do-over. For all of that, maybe not great parenting I did when I was kind of less conscious when I was younger. As I think with a lot in life, I approach all of my opportunities with my kids now with a lot more intention than I used to. Thank you, everybody, for sharing your stories on that. Just a quick overview of the Parsha, even though we're going to be focusing on just a portion of it. So Beha'alotcha begins with the command to Aharon to kindle, more literally raise up, the light of the menorah made out of hammered gold. The Levites are set apart to perform services in the tent of meeting and carry the holy Mishkan and its implements. And they're consecrated in a formal ceremony. Then the story of those Israelites who could not participate in the Pesach sacrifice because they had come into contact with a dead body. They came to Moshe asking what they could do. Moshe asks God, and there is granted the do-over of Pesach Sheni, the second Pesach, 1 month after the holiday, as an opportunity for those contaminated by a corpse or traveling to fulfill the commandment to eat the Pesach sacrifice. The tabernacle is set up, and the cloud of the Shekhinah settles upon it. When the cloud stayed, the Israelites made camp. When it lifted, they traveled on. Moses is commanded to make 2 silver trumpets, which when sounded, serve as signal to gather the chieftains or to move the entire camp forward. The order of the tribes as they marched is recounted. Moses' father-in-law makes a surprise appearance. Moses implores him to stay, but he heads home. Then the famous passage that we say in our Torah service, Vayehi b'nsoah ha'aron, which we studied last year, bracketed curiously by those inverted letters, the nuns. The people break into bitter complaint, strangely nostalgic for the food they imagined they had as slaves in Egypt, sick of the manna that God has provided them, begging for meat. There is a brief mention of two men, Eldad and Medad, prophesying in the camp. Then back to this complaint about their hunger. God, in spite, causes a flock of quail to descend upon the camp, piling many feet high. And as they gorge on this quail meat, a plague strikes the people. Then we end the Parsha with the story of Aharon and Miriam speaking against Moses about his marriage to the Cushite woman. God is angry with them for speaking against Moses, and Miriam is stricken with tzara'at, manifesting with white, scaly skin. Moses implores God to heal her with the famous words, El na rafana la, oh God, I implore you, heal her, please. The entire camp waits for 7 days until Miriam heals. So much going on in this Parsha. Many Divrei Torah could be written on them, and Ashley will be delivering one later today. In liturgical time, we just celebrated Shavuot a couple of weeks ago, so the peak experience of celebrating Matan Torah, the giving of the Torah, is behind us. We have a couple of months of late spring and early summer relaxation ahead of us before the penitential season of the high holidays comes knocking at the door, with a 7-week period that begins with the fast of Tisha B'Av, the 9th day of the month of Av, on July 27th. So believe it or not, that's less than 7 weeks away, and we'll be in that time. But in the meantime, every week is graced with Shabbat. So I would like to start today at pretty much at the beginning of the Parsha, which is Book of Numbers, chapter 8. There's verses 5 to 6, 13, and then 16 to 18. So Annette, do you have that in front of you?
The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Take the Levites from among the Israelites and cleanse them. You shall place the Levites in attendance upon Aaron and his sons, and designate them as an elevation offering to the Lord. For they are formally assigned to me from among the Israelites. I have taken them for myself in place of all the first issue of the womb, of all the firstborn of the Israelites. For every firstborn among the Israelites, man as well as beast, is mine. I consecrate them to myself at the time that I smote every firstborn in the land of Egypt. Now I take the Levites instead of every firstborn of the Israelites."
Okay, thank you. So what questions arise? Yes, Ashley.
Well, I mean, for me, the big question, being kind of a Levite, my mother, not my father, is what does it mean for the Lord to take? What does it mean for us to be his? Does that mean we're slaves to him? We do his duty? That's what my question is.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's a central question of this. So what does it mean for us to be his? Yes, thank you. Annette.
Well, did we ever know this before? And this seems kind of like retroactive, like all of a sudden, I did this great thing to get you out of Egypt, and now, well, this is the last part of this is similar to Ashley's question. Now, in payment, retroactively, these Levites belong to me. This wasn't a contract made in advance. This wasn't a deal made at the time. Now I've decided I'm going to take these people. And what does it mean that I'm taking these people? And do they have any part in the bargain? And is this an honor or is this a punishment?
Right. And in some ways, it's a little bit of both when you read about all of the details about the Levites. Any other questions?
Yes, and this might direct us completely far afield and maybe just better off ignoring this thought entirely. And there is something like a parallel here to the Christian Bible, the idea of someone dying for the sins of another, the idea of the Levites substituting for the firstborn of the Israelites. That construct just kind of struck me.
Yeah,
And again, I don't want to lead us far afield, but that's something that occurred to me.
yeah, no, it's very interesting. I hadn't thought about this whole issue of dying for our sins or substitution, things like that. So there is definitely a similar theme. There's one fundamental question is why the Levites? Right? And in fact, go to Genesis chapter 49, verses 5 through 7. This is at Jacob's deathbed. You may recall he gathers all his sons, and it's sort of his last will and testament, if you will, his final words that he speaks to his sons. And take a look in verses 5 through 7 for what he says about Levi and his running buddy Shimon.
Shimon and Levi are a pair. Their weapons are tools of lawlessness. Let not my person be included in their council. Let not my being be counted in their assembly. For when angry, they slay men, and when pleased, they maim oxen. Cursed be their anger so fierce and their wrath so relentless. I will divide them in Jacob, scatter them in Israel.
Okay, so this is the final note of Genesis on Jacob's deathbed is this rebuke of Levi. And then somehow Levi morphs into the tribe that gets this honor to be so close to carrying the tools of God and the Mishkan, and maybe they sing the Psalms in the temple, and they have the pride of affiliation with Moshe and Aharon. Anyway, there is a transformation here, and what I wanted to do today is follow the Torah narrative and just see how that occurs. And so I think to fully understand the story, we have to begin at the beginning, and the beginning, in a way, is Levi's mother. Does anybody know who Levi's mother was? Levi's mother was Leah. And then this takes us back to the story of Leah. And to really understand the story of Leah, we really need to take into account her sister, Rachel. So let's go to Genesis chapter 29, verses 10 through 11. And Ken, if you have it.
Yeah. And it came to pass when Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and the sheep of Laban, his mother's brother, that Jacob went near and rolled the stone from the well's mouth and watered the flock of Laban, his mother's brother. And Jacob kissed Rachel and lifted up his voice and wept. Okay.
So Jacob has run away to Padan Aram to get away from Esau, who wants to kill him because he's stolen the birthright. And this is his first meeting with Rachel. So what do you make of this encounter, and what do you deduce about this love between Jacob and Rachel? What do you make of it, Annette?
Well, it's like passionate love at first sight kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely a love at first sight kind of thing. And I mean, what does he know about Rachel? Zip, right? I mean, this is, I don't know. I mean, it just, I mean, maybe it's the beginning of a great love story. But, Jacob is in this place. He's in this liminal place. He's vulnerable. He's feeling scared, alone. Here's this woman who's related to him by blood. I'd have to map it out, but I think she's a cousin. And he immediately kisses her, which is just a crazy first act. And interestingly, when you start to think about their parallels, they were both the younger of two siblings, of siblings, and they were shepherds by trade. And that's, in one sense, it's hard work And it could be thought of as being handed to the less favored, or an outsider. What does Moshe become when he gets taken in by Yitro, right? He becomes the shepherd. And then I want to go to another passage, not too far beyond that.
Rich, before we
yeah,
leave that,
please.
I just want to make a comment. There's so much gendered in this, in all of this, that you really have to understand. It seems to me that it's a story of almost all first encounters with Dinah. They get raped, even if there's love that follows. They get raped.
I was thinking we would
now
call-
a kiss is not a rape.
Yeah.
Granted,
But-
granted. The only point I want to make is that this is all from a male gaze, right? So what is attractive about women? You don't have to know anything about them. You just have to know what they look like.
Right. Let's go to chapter 29, a few verses later, 16 through 18.
Now Laban had two daughters. The name of the elder was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. And Leah's eyes were weak, but Rachel was of beautiful form and fair to look upon. And Jacob loved Rachel, and he said, I will serve thee 7 years for Rachel, thy younger daughter.
Okay, so this kind of gives not surprising background to why Jacob may have been so smitten and so bold in how he acted with Rachel. And you see this dynamic of Leah perhaps being less beautiful, and maybe in various different ways less favored. And then let's continue on to 31 through 35, also in chapter 29.
The Lord saw that Leah was unloved, and he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. Leah conceived and bore a son and named him Reuben, for she declared, it means the Lord has seen my affliction. It also means, now my husband will love me. She conceived again and bore a son and declared, this is because the Lord heard that I was unloved and has given me this one also. So she named him Simeon. Again, she conceived and bore a son and declared, this time my husband will become attached to me, for I have borne him 3 sons. Therefore, he was named Levi. She conceived again and bore a son and declared, this time I will praise the Lord. Therefore, she named him Judah. Then she stopped bearing.
Okay, thank you. So this theme of her being unloved is even translated to the names of her children. So this is just heartbreaking, actually, to kind of read this starting to be played out on the children. And I want to just direct everybody to verse 31, a translation issue. So the word unloved, snuah, is translated as unloved. Does anybody have a different translation other than JPS for verse 31, seeing that Leah was unloved? Different word?
Mine says hated.
Hated. That is the direct translation of the Hebrew. Snuah means the hated one, or a hated one. There's a midrash, by the way. I'll just say that the third one you'll see has a little bit of a positive tinge to it. The midrash says that Leah had a vision that there would be 12 sons, and since there were 4 wives, at the third son she at least had met her quota. So there was some relief there. I want to go further.
Rich, can I
yes.
say
Go
something?
ahead.
The name Levi in Hebrew, doesn't it mean my heart?
So actually, the phonetically it sounds the same, but the heart is lev with a bet, not a vav.
Oh, and Levi
Yeah.
is not with a
Right,
bet.
Levi is a vav. Yeah,
Oh.
but I'm glad you sort of tried to make that connection. But there is the concept of connection in Levi, and I don't know if maybe linguistically there is a relationship there, but Levi is like to be accompanied. And so her hope was that they might be joined together. And there's also a hint in the text that Yaakov was the one who named Levi as opposed to the other children. But I want to go to something that's really striking also in chapter 33, because this really speaks to where Jacob held everybody in his affections. Chapter 33, verses 4 through 7. Annette, so remember, this is the reconciliation meeting where Jacob's not sure if Esau is coming to kill him.
Right.
So go ahead.
Esau ran to greet him. He embraced him, and falling on his neck, he kissed him, and they wept. He saw the women and the children. Who, he asked, are these with you? He answered, the children with whom God has favored your servant. Then the maids with their children came forward and bowed low. Next, Leah with her children came forward and bowed low. And last, Joseph and Rachel came forward and bowed low.
So what do we get from the order in which these people have been placed in harm's way?
That Rachel is the most important.
Yeah,
She's the last. Rachel and her children are the last, so those are the people he wanted to protect the most. I mean,
right.
the maids came first, so they're the most expendable.
Right. I mean, it's just if you're the kids, it's not lost on you where you rank and where you fit. And so the question is, if you're being raised in this extended family with very clear second-class status, how do you think you come out of it?
Damaged.
But in what way? What qualities might be?
Oh, I was second-class status, insecure, angry, self-doubting, ambivalent about your siblings,
Yeah.
love-hate relationship with your parent. You want me to go on? I spent years in therapy about this.
Okay. Okay, so we've hit the nerve. You get it. And thank you.
You get
for
a second
listening.
chance.
Yes. What was the one about the parents you said?
A love-hate relationship with
Love-hate,
a parent who put you in second-class status.
Right. Right. I think those are just so on the nose. And I think that it all comes together in the very next chapter, in chapter 34, that story of the rape of Dinah. You know, what are the qualities of Levi that you see displayed in the story?
Well, a lot of anger and violence.
Yep. I mean, this is a mass murder, right?
Yeah.
To avenge a rape. And what I think is really interesting is, I mean, it's obviously it's an extreme reaction, it's an overreaction, and you can see the fruits of this scorned upbringing, right, in this story. I'm wondering if you could point to one thing in that story that really might be the thing that set Levi off. I think Jacob's silence and the fact that he waited for the sons to come home. And for Levi, this might have been pretty triggering to say, here's another instance of you kind of not standing up. And it's on me, the one who you've disfavored, to take care of the family honor. You're not fulfilling your duty, and I'm the one who has to do it. I think if he's inclined to hate Jacob, which he probably is, this probably was the thing that pushed him over the edge. At least something led to this disproportionate reaction. Yes, Debbie.
It's very interesting because in the version that I'm using, which is Biblegate, which is a Catholic interpretation, they don't distinguish between Shimon and Levi. Isn't that interesting? They
It is
make
interesting.
no distinction. I read it 4 times and I can't find it.
Well, it goes back to the deathbed curse, right? They're paired. So just as a reminder, Genesis ends, Jacob curses them, and then we move. The next encounter with Levi is Exodus chapter 2. And for those who have been following the cycle of teachings together, we studied this when we did the first chapter of the book of Exodus. And we're going to do verses 1 through 3. And Ashley, if you could read us Exodus chapter 2, verses 1 through 3.
Sure. A certain man of the house of Levi went and married a Levite woman. The woman conceived and bore a son, and when she saw how beautiful he was, she hid him for 3 months. When she could hide him no longer, she got a wicker basket for him and caulked it with bitumen and pitch. She put the child into it and placed it among the reeds by the bank of the Nile. And his sister stationed herself at a distance to learn what would befall him.
Okay, so there's a lot of him, no names. We don't even know that this is Moshe, right? At the beginning, all we know is a man of the tribe of Levi. And some commentators take this as a statement of the tribal pride of affiliation. What really matters is that this is a story of a man of Levi. So then a few sentences later, we learn something about Moshe from his first reported act. So Ashley, you're in the neighborhood there. Read us verses 11 and 12.
Sometime after that, when Moses had grown up, he went out to his kinsfolk and witnessed their labors. He saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his kinsmen. He turned this way and that, and seeing no one about, he struck down the Egyptian and hid him in the sand.
Okay. Do we see any echoes of Levi here? What do we see?
Anger and violence and an overreaction.
Anger, violence, overreaction. What else do we see? Why is he angry? What's the source of the anger?
An act of violence that he saw.
An act of violence? And what's another way of characterizing that act? Injustice?
Injustice, unauthorized authority, whatever.
And why would Levi perhaps be, or a man of Levi be perhaps particularly sensitive to injustice and unfairness?
Injustice done to them and their family.
Yeah, right? He was the scorned one.
Yeah.
For, and completely blameless for it, and yet lived with the scar of being the less favored one. Yes, Debbie.
I have a question. In this version, one day after Moses had grown up, he went out to where his own people were and watched them at their hard labor. Moses knew he was.
This is a whole, this is a whole involved thing where the Midrash comes in to fill the gaps that you are pointing to, saying, how did he know? And so one of the things the Midrash talks about is, do you remember that Miriam, his sister, came forward out of the reeds and said, I can find a nurse for Moshe, and she brings his mother Yocheved to the fore. And so suppose one of the Midrashic fill-ins there is that Yocheved, as his nurse and someone who was able to sort of be there for his upbringing, let him know who he was. Another Midrash, by the way, is that Pharaoh's daughter converted to Judaism in secret. I mean, so the Midrash is making it up, right? Just trying to figure out, fill in the lacunae there. Yes, Annette.
I'm going to suggest that while his biological mother may not have wanted him to know, it would be really hard for a biological mother who is taking care of her biological child to not, over time, in some way, to reveal to that child who he or she really is.
Yes.
So I like that Midrash better, for whatever it's worth.
Yeah, no, that Midrash feels true, right?
Yeah, it feels more true than the Pharaoh's daughter converted to me. I just think she might not have said it directly, but I'm sure, how could you not let your child know that you are my child?
Yes.
Just,
And that disclosure was in secret. She would not have.
yeah, I think
So
she
we'll
would
be
have waited till he
consistent.
was old enough to be able to keep the secret.
Let's continue on, because I want to go to the turning point of the story that I think is central to how we get to the Levites being the ones who are elevated. And on that, we're going to go to the story of the golden calf. And so much turns on the golden calf story, which, forms a shadow over the last couple of books of the Torah. And so remember, Moshe is up on the mountain with God receiving the tablets, and he's told that the people are worshiping a golden calf. He rushes down the mountain to see the awful spectacle of the Israelites worshiping this golden calf. Chapter 32, verses 25 through 29. Ken.
And when Moses saw that the people were broken loose, for Aaron had let them loose for derision among their enemies, then Moses stood in the gate of the camp and said, "Whoso is on the Lord's side, let him come unto me." And all the sons of Levi gathered themselves together unto him. And he said unto them, "Thus saith the Lord, the God of Israel, put ye every man his sword upon his thigh, and go to and fro from gate to gate throughout the camp, and slay every man his brother, and every man his companion, and every man his neighbor." And the sons of Levi did according to the word of Moses, and there fell of the people that day about 3,000 men. And Moses said, "Consecrate yourselves today to the Lord, for every man hath been against his son and against his brother, that he may also bestow upon you a blessing this day." Wow.
The connection to the earlier violence of Levi is like obvious, right? And this, and I obviously there's a difficulty with this story because it's more murder, right? But the essence of this story is it's taking this passion and this capacity for anger and it's putting it in service of the divine, whatever you may think of that. That's where Levi steps forward and is chosen by God. As difficult as that legacy is, there is a pivot on that passion and that anger, ostensibly in service of something better. In a similar vein, go to Numbers chapter 25, verses 1 through 11. This is the story of the Israelites starting to consort with the Moabites who worshipped Baal Peor, and that it's 1 through 11. And that name is Pinchas, that you'll see there, Phineas, Pinchas.
When Israel was staying at Shittim, the people profaned themselves by whoring with the Moabite women, who invited the people to the sacrifices for their God. The people partook of them and worshipped that God. Thus Israel attached itself to Baal Peor, and the Lord was incensed with Israel. The Lord said to Moses, "Take the ringleaders and have them publicly impaled before the Lord, so that the Lord's wrath may turn away from Israel." So Moses said to Israel's officials, "Each of you slay those of his men who attach themselves to Baal Peor." Just then, one of the Israelites came and brought a Midianite woman over to his companions in the sight of Moses and of the whole Israelite community, who were weeping at the entrance of the tent of meeting. When Pinchas, son of Eleazar, son of Aaron the priest, saw this, he left the assembly, and taking a spear in his hand, he followed the Israelite into the chamber and stabbed both of them, the Israelite and the woman, through the belly. Then the plague against the Israelites was checked. Those who died of the plague numbered 24,000. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Pinchas, son of Eleazar, son of Aaron the priest, has turned back my wrath from the Israelites by displaying among them his passion for me, so that I did not wipe out our Israelite people in my passion." Oh my God.
Yeah, so I mean, this is a streak that runs deep in the family there, right? So this is another Levite, Aaron's grandson, and he's taking that passion, which God kind of approves of. So I think where I want to go with this story is to ask you to kind of move beyond the sort of the violence that's the underpinning of it, but to at least talk about the way in which that passion and violence is sort of, and potential for violence ends up being channeled to something that's ostensibly a little better. A couple of facts about the Levites. They unlike all of the tribes that got a allocation of land, Levites did not. They lived off the tithes. Their job was to carry the holy implements. They were singers of the Psalms in the temple. They were teachers. Because they had no possessions, they lived in 48 different cities. 6 of them were the cities of refuge, where someone who committed manslaughter would go. And it's interesting that they were maybe in some ways the anger counselors in those cities of refuge, right? Where, off you go to one of these where maybe you commit a crime of passion as opposed to premeditation. In the same way, they're a little bit dangerous in their zeal, and so they're scattered. And I think there's a little bit of that. There's a famous saying, the Lord is their inheritance, Adonai hu nachalato, that we say in the El Mole Rachamim, when someone goes, to heaven, and in the afterlife, God is their inheritance. We say that, but that was originally applied to the Levites. One last thing is that in the census of the Israelites that happens at the beginning of Bamidbar, you may recall that the Israelites who are counted are the males who are 20 and above, the fighters. The Levites were counted from 30 days and above. So there's a completely different count for them. We'll talk about that. So we hit the end of the Torah. The transition of the role of the Levites is complete. And the journey is encapsulated in Moses's final words to Levi. So remember, Jacob has his deathbed oration, Moshe has his deathbed oration. So go to Devarim, Deuteronomy 33, 8 through 10.
Okay, and if
Parallel to Jacob.
Thy Tumim and thy Urim be with thy Holy One, whom thou didst prove at Massah, with whom thou didst strive at the waters of Meribah, who said of his father and of his mother, I have not seen him. Neither did he acknowledge his brethren, nor knew he his own children. For they have observed thy word and keep thy covenant. They shall teach Jacob thine ordinances and Israel thy law. They shall put incense before thee and whole burnt offering upon thine altar.
So thank you. Some of this is obscure, but this whole point of his brothers he disregarded. This was when Moshe said, put your sword on your thigh and kill everybody, and I don't care if it's your relatives. But also that they will be instructors within Israel. So you move from the end of Genesis, where they are the lowest of the low, and now they are elevated. So I want to give some kind of closing words here to tie this together in a way. And I want to go back to this notion of what do the Levites have to do with the plague of the firstborn? Because that was one of the questions we had, and it seems like kind of an odd turn. And to me, it comes to the theme of redemption. And that redemption is at the heart of the story of the Levites. They're the literal embodiment of the redemption from Egypt, right? 2 men of Levi, Moshe and Aharon, are the ones who confront Pharaoh and lead the Israelites out of slavery. There's a second redemption that results from Adonai's belief that Adonai has a claim on every Israelite firstborn, because if they were not delivered from Egypt, they would have died in Pharaoh's decree. And so because they literally owe their lives to God, there is a redemption, there's a substitution where God says, the firstborn should really be the ones who are in service to me, but we'll put that burden on the Levites, and there is an exchange of redemption. But the story also contains a third redemption, which I think is the way we would use redemption colloquially in English. Levi, who in his youth was someone capable of mass murder, would become the progenitor of priests. And as an old man would bounce Miriam, Aharon, and Moshe on his knee. Goes from the scorned son of the hated mother to the tribe chosen by God. Guardians of the holy, singers of the Psalms, like the former gang member who, after spending his youth in prison, ages into the youth counselor. It still takes passion. The Slonim Rebbe always asks, Ma hanitzchiyut, what is the enduring lesson? In the story of Levi, we see a lesson relevant to our time, that redemption is available to anyone. We can reframe our most challenging aspects. The passion manifested in youthful anger can mature into a relentless pursuit of justice. Deep pain can enable true compassion. Childhood disrespect can fuel the adult's ambition. Also, we know how dysfunction and trauma can span generations, but a family's musical theme can be altered. The key of the melody can shift from minor to major. The journey to self-understanding and self-actualization is lifelong. Unlike the other tribes who were counted from the age of 20 years, the Levitical census in Bamidbar counted all Levites aged 30 days and older. They were dedicated from infancy to a lifelong journey to godliness. And so may we be strengthened in our journey to realize our best selves and to redemption.
That was
Shabbat shalom.
beautiful, Rich.
Shalom. What were you reading from at the end?
I just wrote that.
Oh,
That was beautiful.
yeah. I thought some sage or other.
I know.
I don't know, it was right.
Yeah.
We certainly should end there. But there's a part of me that wonder if we are imposing understandings about trauma, understandings about being secondary or the mistreated middle child. This was a very violent time and period.
Annette, do you have a response to that?
My only response is I don't think the world has changed that much. And I think that's one of the reasons I love reading Torah.